Mama Laide is building a new branch for a food business, the Amala joint. So she discusses with her head chef about the kitchen space. She also talks with her daughter, who's an interior decorator, about the decoration for the new branch. And she discusses with her accountant as well about the budget. Then the builder comes in and he asks the question, who do I get sign off from? In other words, who approves the final plan? This scenario is very similar to what business analysts often face when working on projects. At different points in time, you need to determine who to get sign off from. Sign off for your requirements implies that the requirements have been accepted and approved. So, who signs off requirements? There are three key things you'd be looking out for in determining the person who needs to sign off the requirements. First of all, they should understand the business's goals. So they need to be at a level where they understand what the business is trying to do. Secondly, they must be in a position to approve the funding. So they must be in charge of the funds for that particular project. And finally, they must be accountable for the project's success. In other words, the buck stop at their table. If the project is successful, they are the ones who will say, yes, it is successful. And if not, they are the ones who determine that it is not yet done, it's not yet over. That is what it means to be accountable. Many times, the person that would tick those three boxes would be the business sponsor or the project sponsor, or in an agile environment, that might be the product owner. But let's break that down some more. For big projects, usually you would have maybe a departmental head or a business leader, a senior leader who is going to play the role of the business sponsor. The sponsor part in it implies that they are in a position to approve the funding for that particular project. However, it's possible that you are working in an agile environment. In agile teams, there is a designated role for the person who's the custodian of the product backlog or the list of user stories, which are the requirements in an agile environment. That person is known as the product owner. And so the product owner becomes the one to sign off on those requirements in such a context. Sometimes it can be the project manager, although many times the project manager is not the final authority. The work of the project manager is really about the time, scope, and the cost, and making sure that all of those things work together. So signing off on requirements is not really the domain of a project manager. Sometimes it just happens within the course of a project that the project manager signs off on stuff, oftentimes still requiring authority from the project sponsor. Sometimes also the project is for maybe a specific department. In such an instance, the departmental head would be the one to sign off. So if, for example, it is something like maybe a software for the HR department, it is understandable that in such an instance, the head of the HR department would be the one to sign off on the requirements for that particular project. That head of department in such an instance is acting as the process owner. And then sometimes it's a consulting project. You have an external client. In such an instance, the person who signs off would be the external client or the person that they have designated to represent them. So back to our dear Mama Laide, let's assume that all the requirements have been gathered for a new building. A chef loves it, a daughter loves it. These different people give some forms of approval. But the reality is that the real sign-off, the real final approval is the one that will come from Mama Laide herself. Why? Because in this instance, she is the project sponsor, she is the financier, and the decision maker. This makes her the final authority. But why does all of this matter? Why do you need sign-off? Well, two key reasons. First of all, you want to reduce the possibility of scope creep. Scope creep is a situation where the scope of a project keeps changing because nobody actually ever locked it down. Nobody signed off the exact scope that you had at a particular point in time. So it keeps changing, it keeps getting expanded. And the second one is the blame game situation. Imagine that the project fails, and this happens many times. If it does fail, then who's responsible for the failure? If nobody ever agreed to the requirements, that puts everything on you as the business analyst. But if it was agreed to, then there is clear understanding about what should have been done, and that removes the responsibility for that failure from you. So, as a business analyst, always ensure that you have formal sign off. Have it in writing, even if that is an email confirming sign off. And keep a record of who signed off. Who signed off? When did they sign off? Have all of those. If you want to handle it like a pro, you can have a requirements sign off document. Essentially, that's going to be a simple table that includes the requirement ID, the description, the stakeholder name, and the signature or confirmation date. In closing, always treat requirements as a contract. When they are signed, when they are approved, then they become a contract. But if they are not signed, they're just ideas on paper or ideas in your head. As a business analyst, you want to always have written records, ensuring that the right people reviewed the requirements, ensuring that the final decision maker signed off on it, and ensuring that everybody knows who said yes. My name is Olumide Adeleye. I'll see you in my next video. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button, leave a like, leave a comment. And if you need training, business analysis training, just head over to businessanalysiscoach.com. You'd find practical training, certification training. You'd find stuff that suits your requirements. See you in my next video.